Today we are going to look at LangGraph persistence to DB. Persistence in LangGraph has two aspects. One is that it persists state across all nodes and edges of LangGraph as the workflow proceeds. But there is a subtle aspect to it that you can also persist it on disk on a database, right? So which is what we'll look at today. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit of terms and terminologies that are related to this, right? Okay, so first of all, you'll do all the imports, okay? Uh, and after that, you'll define a state, okay? So now this state is very simple. I'm just going to use an integer, okay? Now it needs to use annotated, right? This annotated is from the Python typing, right? It's saying that this count is integer and its default value is 0. Okay, if we don't do this annotated, then there will be issues, as I'll explain later. Okay, uh, so then I'm going to define the nodes and edges, right? So I have two simple nodes, increment count and ask user. Okay, uh, now we define the line graph, right? So this is a state graph, right? Taking the state that we defined above. So this is our graph, right? Now we define the nodes, or we add the nodes in the graph, right? We have only two nodes, increment count and ask user. Okay, so I'm going to add that, right? Now we have to set the entry point. So the entry point is the increment count. Okay, so as you can see in the increment count, what I'm doing is I'm just incrementing the count, right? The state count. I'm adding one to that. Okay. Now I just add two simple edges, one from the increment count to ask user and the other from ask user to increment count. Okay. Uh, okay. Now here comes the persistence. Okay. So we are going to use the SQLite database for persistence. Okay. So SQLite is very simple. On Mac, it's already installed. You don't have to do anything, right? But I'm going to create the database, right? So the database is this testdb.db. So I'm going to create that database, right? Now once you create that database, you should see it here. Okay, so when I say dot databases, it shows my database. Okay, so this is the database I'm going to use here, right? So for comparison, what I'm going to do is going to do a persistence to database with this db persister, and I'm going to use a in-memory persister. Okay, so we again use the same SQLite saver, right? But this colon memory colon basically tells that it is in memory. Okay, now we'll see in a bit what is the difference between these two persisters. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile the graph, one with uh, the database as the check pointer. So this persistor you have to pass as a check pointer to the compile method, right? So this is a app db, which is going to persist the state in the database, right, that we saw here. The app memory is going to use the SQLite persister, which is in memory. Okay. Now for this demo purpose, I'm going to use this interrupt before ask user. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle between increment user and ask user nodes, right? But before ask user, I'm going to interrupt so that I can kind of, pick at the state and I can print it. Okay. Okay. So this is a simple graph. Now the simplest way to do look at this graph is to print it. So I'm going to display it, right? So as you can see, I start, right, then I just kind of keep looping between increment count and ask user, right? I mean, this a bad graph, it doesn't go to end, right? But that's okay. This is just a demo. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is that this app db, right, I'm going to interact with that. Okay, so basically it will do the increment count, right, and before the ask user it's going to stop, right? So let's see what it does, and I'm going to print that state. Okay, so as you can see, the count was 0, it got incremented to 1, right, and then it sort of interrupted. Okay, same thing I'll do with the app memory, right? So if I do that, right, you'll see that it did the same thing, right? Now, uh, if you notice, right, I had a pass count as 0 to both of these, right? But if I do none, what it does is actually it queries the state as it is persisted in both these cases, right? And it will increment from the previous count, right? So in this case, the count should go to 2. Okay, boom. So count went to 2, right? Now the same thing will happen with the in-memory persister, right? Because it's persisted in memory, right? But the memory is kind of here as the kernel or the application is running, right? So it should give us the same result. Okay, boom. Okay, so now one cool thing I'll show a little bit of under the hood for the persistent to the database is we kind of looked at the databases, right? Now we look at the tables, right? So this checkpoints is a table that is kind of created by our persistence to the DB, right? Now you can look at the schema of this particular table, right? This checkpoints table, right? So if you do dot schema on that table, you'll see it has a thread ID, it has a thread TS, right? It has a parent TS, it has a checkpoint, which is a blob, right? Metadata, right? And it has a primary key of thread ID and thread TS. So now, if I do select star from checkpoints, right? We'll see, boom, right? So it basically has a thread ID, right? So thread ID 2222. Now you might wonder that, oh, like, what happened? I had a thread ID of 2 and 3, right? But then 3 was with the in-memory persistence, right? So that won't show up, right? So only thread ID 2 would show up, right? Now, as you can see, right, all these are thread ID 2, right? Now, one more thing we can do is instead of looking at all the columns, we can look at just the blob, the checkpoint blob, right, to see uh, the state, right? So now, as you can see, right, if you see the count here, right, the count here would get incremented, right? So the count was 0, it's 0, right? Count became 1, 1, right? Uh, and it became 2. Okay, so which is what is expected. Okay. Now, you might wonder that, hey, like, this is very complicated, right? I mean, this is like this state is in a blob, right? Now you have to parse the blob and get the state, right? Uh, so you don't have to worry about all that when you restart an application. So I'll just demo that part, right? So what I'll do is uh, I will basically restart the kernel, right? And initialize all the applications up to these points, right? So what I'll do is I'll do restart kernel uh, and run to the uh, selection cell, right? So I restarted. Now, boom, the memory will go away, right? So our in-memory persistence has gone away, right? Okay, now it's the same graph, right? Now, what I will do for interaction is uh, I won't do this, right? Because if it is persisted in database, right? Now this is a app DB, right? If I interact with this, right, now what should happen is it should automatically pick up the last state, right, which is count 2, right? And now it give me a count 3, right? So let's see whether it does that. Boom, right? It did that, right? And now if you look at the state, right, you'll see that, oh, it added that additional state, right? Additional count 3 state got persisted. Okay. Now what happens to this in-memory persister, right? Boom, it won't work, right? Because this is not persisted to the database, right? It was in memory, right? The moment we kind of restarted the kernel, it went away, right? So that is the difference between a persistence to the database and the in-memory persistence. I hope you liked it. If you like this video, please click like, subscribe to my channel, and thanks a lot. Looking forward to doing more videos for you.